On this episode of One Step Better, we are joined by Mary Prendergast, a nurse with the HSE who specialises in restorative practices and wellbeing. Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I suppose first question for you: could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, well, essentially, I like to describe myself as a nurse. Always grateful for my career in healthcare. Within it, I moved into education over a period of time, so nurse training, nurse education, and then I went on to do psychology, neuroscience, and counselling. So I do a lot of debriefings with staff in critical situations, traumas, all that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and it's very necessary, of course, in healthcare environments and in other aspects of life where we're overwhelmed with difficult issues in our lives.
Yes. I suppose the last maybe 15, 20 years now, there's been such a great focus on mental health. I suppose, at what point did you get into it, or did you make that sort of turn towards
It's
mental, or what
interesting.
inspired it, I should say?
Yeah, as a child, going to the zoo with my father when we weren't winning hurling All Irelands and going for the day to Croke Park, I didn't like the reptiles, so he would take me off down to where the gorillas were, and essentially he'd say, "This is the nearest living thing on earth to you." And it was interesting because there started my interest in understanding how an animal like that, who was a
Mm.
mammal and very similar qualities to our own, was like me and what was the difference. And that began rolling around in my head about learning about my brain and aspects of humanity. And then generally, went to a war-torn country where children were very abused and tortured, and I worked with a beautiful psychologist who his interest was in art
Mm.
and the expression of trauma through color and art, and that really spiked my interest. So I came back and did some programs after that, and really got interested in psychology from that aspect.
Wow, that's incredible. I suppose diving into it here, when we talk about stress, what's actually happening in our minds, in our bodies, when when it starts to hit? What's actually happening to us?
Yeah, and we can define stress as a state of worry, mental agitation, tension in the body, in response to a difficult situation. And, we talk about stress in a very negative way, but actually, stress is a natural response in the body to help us deal with difficult situations and overcome our, issues that are presenting, that are causing this distress in the first place. And it's quite natural for everybody to experience stress at some period of their life. And, it's quite natural to experience what I call stretching. So when you want to do something new, you're stretching yourself a little bit to do it.
Mm.
And that will stress you while you're preparing to do it, doing it. But you get a great feeling of achievement when it's over. For example, if I want to bungee jump, well, I have to prepare myself to do it. And when I have it done, I just feel that calm in my body. It's exhilarating adrenaline first, and then it's a real calm.
Yes.
So, stress is not all bad. We do need it in different aspects of our life to help and support us to live a very active and challenging life at times.
Yeah, so it's actually quite a necessity, if anything. Not only is
Yes.
it not only is it unavoidable, it is a necessity.
Yeah, it's a natural response in the body. Of course, the variations will be different. For example, if you're working in an area that has a high intensity or workload, it will, your body becomes used to that level of stress.
Mm.
So, therefore, you have to go above moderate in some places, within your body to start to feel the response in your body. But that doesn't mean you're not stressed. And it doesn't mean that the mechanism that you're using, is the same as the fight and flight. It is. It's just used in a different way in the body. So, going back to that gorilla that I was talking about that I met as a child in the zoo, when you think about him, he has a big frontal lobe like we have. when you look at the brain is really interesting in the sense that this frontal lobe is huge with human beings, and it makes us the most intelligent of the species for lots of reasons. And, you know, we talk about the brain. I think understanding and knowing and understanding the brain helps you manage your stress, because you will experience things in your body and you will say, okay, that's normal. Okay, so we are the only human beings and the only beings that are mammals that are capable of worrying about anything. The gorilla won't worry where the dinner is coming from tomorrow evening. It'll come in over the top of the gate to him in the zoo, or he'll search for it in the wild.
Yes.
Yeah, so
living very much in the present.
living very much in the
Yes.
present.
And is that something then, I suppose, as humans, we might struggle with sometimes?
Actually, yeah, and you know, we have different things that are similar. For example, the gorilla will protect its family, it'll protect its territory. We do the same. We protect our homes and we protect the people we care about. So there are great similarities, but this beautiful, big, creative brain, in particular the frontal lobe,
Yeah.
and the neocortex aspect of the frontal lobe, this is almost like the computer stimulus of the brain. So it's really, really interesting.
So you've talked about the frontal lobe and the neocortex. Could you maybe give us like a brief overview of those parts of the brain? You say it's something worth sort of understanding and kind of getting a sense of where all this stuff is coming from. It would be great for
Sure.
you to give us maybe a breakdown of that.
Okay, we'll try. We'll do our best. You know, I'm a great fan of a man called Dan Seeger. He's a psychologist, writer, teacher, and he goes into classrooms where there are children and he says, raise your hand. So when you raise your hand, that's your spine. The fleshy part of your hand is considered the medulla oblongata in the brain, which is the brain stem right here. He says, make a fist. So make a fist. That's the frontal lobe, this part here that juts out here. Take your thumb and put it into the middle of your fist. That's the limbic system. So in there, in the limbic system, there's a security officer, as I call him, called the amygdala. And that security officer decides how speeded up I want to be or not. And, you know, in a lot of traditions, I often explain it by taking a coin out of my bag, which I don't carry a lot of today. We use cards and all these different things. But if you took, for example, a euro coin and you put it half a finger breadth up here into the middle of your frontal lobe there, into your neocortex, just there, a lot of traditions would consider that the middle eye. But in neuroscience, we know that's the tip of the neocortex where the changes happen in our brain when we are stressed. So the amygdala sits deep in the temporal lobes of the brain, right down deep. And I often bring an apple into the classroom when I'm talking to people and I say, slice the apple in half. And when you open the apple up, it has what was like seedlings in it, you know, with a leaf-like structure either side. And if you consider those two almond-shaped leaf-like structures together in the deepest aspects of your brain, controlling your responses, it makes it easier to understand. A lot of the time, the amygdala controls a lot of negative emotions. So we store a lot of our negative emotions in there.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, you did. I'm blown away. It's obviously such a complex system, and there's so much
Yeah.
going on. It was great to have those sort of visual cues. So thank you so much for that. I suppose then when we're dealing with stress, what are some strategies that you recommend for dealing with that?
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, you have to recognize what stress is in your body. You know, if you're working in intense environments, you may not recognize it until it's way above moderate. So the cues really for understanding your stress is listening to your body and what your body is telling you. So a lot of the time, it may be that you're drained, exhausted, can't concentrate, feeling a little bit detached from yourself, a kind of foggy understanding of the world around you.
Yes.
Oftentimes your appetite might get less because you're using up a lot of your resources, and so therefore you don't feel like eating. It can be the other way. We can comfort eat as well. We can't find ease and peace in our bodies. You know, that feeling you get when you have this nice, relaxed feeling after doing something, such as a run or a nice walk or a swim, or indeed meeting with friends or whatever, but you have this relaxed feeling. You can actually feel the relaxation in your body, either hot or cold or pins and needles. Um, Other traditions might call that the energy you feel, you know. Also, stress can exacerbate the conditions of other situations you have going on in your body. For example, it's often the trigger for some autoimmune illnesses, such as psoriasis and arthritis and different forms of autoimmune.
So that feeling of stress can come as a symptom of that, is it?
Yes, it can.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and of course, you know, stress can lead to the exacerbation of our mental understanding of the world and create this almost cloud-like feeling over us. So, to see how we can manage that is the key,
Yes.
because our responses are key.
Well, it's interesting even just to hear you say how a lot of the time, and I can understand it in my own life, is sometimes we don't realize we're stressed until we're much
Yeah.
further beyond that point. It gets to a point of maybe exploding, or it gets to a point of, you know, beyond reproach. We're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, you know. So I suppose what are the best ways then to maybe manage it before we get to that point, before things are,
Exactly.
you know.
And, you know, what is the science behind it? You know, I always say, give me the science. It may not explain everything, but it gives me a rationale for understanding.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start with the science of it. You know, if you're stressed, your system feels like I plugged you in and turned on the switch. It's like boot to the floor in the car. It's like your whole system becomes alive and on fire. And the reason for that is the amygdala fires into the neocortex here. I don't want to be too complicated
No,
about
please.
it, but it fires into the neocortex here, and it tightens up this part of the neocortex. So actually, when we're stressed, we're less likely to be as intelligent as we are or to do things well.
Yes.
Because this is tightened. So the way I explain this is, you know, we often talk about the lion coming to eat me, you know, and if the lion is coming to eat me, how do I process that feeling in my body? So the body wants you to see the threat. Brain wants you to see the threat. It wants you to see the lion and the lion only. So it stops contextualizing things around it.
Yes.
So you don't see the color of the lion or what the lion is standing in, because it's still a lion and it's going to eat me. So that's the first thing it does, is it stimulates into the neocortex. Okay, so that it shrinks in this neocortex here. And the second thing it does, if it's prolonged and over moderate for quite a period of time, it stops us processing good endorphins in our body. So we're just on a neb. We're just going to work, going to sleep, going to eat, we're panned out. You know, there's no excitement in our lives. And those are neuropeptides, and those good endorphins are things like serotonin, for example, which we need to repair our brain, particularly in our sleep. And so if we don't have that, the neural pathways aren't repairing themselves as much.
So again, I've heard of the term serotonin. I've heard it as sort of like a happy
Yeah,
chemical, but
yeah.
it actually has a function,
It has
a repairing function in the brain.
practical scientific function.
Yeah.
And in the nighttime, we use serotonin a lot to repair the neural pathways in the brain.
Okay.
The next thing that happens is the oxytocin reduces. So the oxytocin is, I feel that I'm heard, I'm seen, I'm loved, I'm understood. And that starts to diminish as that hormone actually lessens. And we saw that during COVID, that when we couldn't shake hands or hug, you know, there was a certain detachment in our lives as a feeling for not having that oxytocin.
Yes.
The other thing is dopamine, and dopamine is the intelligent drug. That's why we want to have the piece of chocolate while we're studying for the exam, because it opens up the neural centers and allows me to take in more information.
Okay.
But when our dopamine levels go down, I don't feel inspired. I don't feel enthusiastic, innovated, pushed to do things. So again, my life starts to feel like I'm going to work, going to eat, going to sleep.
Yes.
Right? So, and the other thing that happens in the brain is when we're stressed is that the we start to develop this negative scan. It's quite natural, and I say to people, it's okay. You know, if you're stressed and under pressure, you will see things that are wrong very quickly. So the only way I can explain it to you is if I was going for a nice walk down by the river tonight and it was a bit later than I thought, and I didn't get back to my car in time and the dusk had come, I would be very alerted to what's walking behind me or coming behind me or what was in the bushes.
Mm.
So my hearing gets heightened and my eyesight gets heightened. Doesn't get improved, just gets heightened, more
Okay.
alerted. Now that feeling will go when I get into the car to go home
Mm.
or in my front door. But if I'm working in an environment that's creating that tension every day, you can see how that begins to have difficulties in the body.
Yes.
And, you know, we were always taught in psychology that, you know, the body and the brain worked in unison, but we know they're intrinsically linked. They're hugging one another.
Yes.
So if we have a problem in our psychology, it may affect our physicality, and vice versa. A problem in our physicality can affect our psychology. So we do know that, you know, um, the body is stimulated just a tiny bit after the brain. And we often talk about this HPA axis or HPAT in America axis. And it's about this part of the brain called the hippocampus
Mm-hmm.
that stimulates the pineal gland, that stimulates the adrenal gland. And that releases hormones, stress hormones into the body.
I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about serotonin, the oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we have these stressors. What are ways in which that we can sort of encourage that serotonin, that oxytocin? I know you talked a little bit with the dopamine, the idea that chocolate bar on the side, you know, to give us that, you know, to open us up a little bit more. I suppose, how are we sort of,
Okay.
how can we encourage that
Yeah.
serotonin, that oxytocin, those
Well,
happy chemicals?
managing our stress means having an intelligent understanding of how our body functions. But it also means that we should develop routines, not to be mundane, but to be efficient and to allow time for things we want to do. If you were in the army, for example, they have a routine in the morning with the beds and the uniforms and all of that. And we had it in nursing years ago. But it's
Do those
like,
corners on the side of the bed.
yeah,
Yeah, get all that.
it's kind of, you know, what it does is that it gives space in your brain for other things.
Yes.
When we develop routines that can help and support us in our day. Also eating well, of course, eating as much fresh fruit and vegetables as we can manage, and knowing when we are, you know, we're on the verge of indulgence. And of course, we know that when we have this feeling of tension in our body and we can't release it for whatever reason, we're more inclined to reach for things that aren't the best and healthiest to relieve it, such as the tobacco or the alcohol or substances of some kind. So we're more inclined to do that. I'm a great believer in water as a therapeutic function in our body. We carry a lot of water in our bodies anyway, and there's an alpha wave in the brain that's particularly adaptable to water. So running water, running rivers, you know, that go over little indents in the river and it starts to almost become a wave.
So it's not even, are you saying it's not even just the consumption of water, it's also being around and near water?
Around and near water.
Okay.
This sea particularly, now this blue sea water swimming is a different science. But for me, you know, in Harvard and also in Brown University in the States, they looked at this connection with water and how it affects the alpha waves in the brain. So if we're near the sea, for example, we're really fortunate because the sea is like a natural calibration to the alpha waves. It's like plugging them in and retiming them. So the actual flow of the sea, the rhythmical nature of the waves, the response that makes in the body. Actually, the body can feel calm, but the alpha waves can still be fast sometimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So when there is that maybe disconnect there, what's happening there in the body then?
What's happening is that the body is now exposed to stress for a long time and finds a way to generate some form of a response to stay going, but the brain is still heightened, right? So to actually detoxify the brain and to bring it into a safe, calm space, things like water are very beneficial. Um, Other things, exercise teaches your brain that what you do matters, you know, your functioning matters. So exercise, and even aggressive exercise at times is good, but here's the thing: exercise on top of a very stressed and panned out body, and you overstress it with exercise. I mean, practically speaking, the body will find a way to release that stress. So, I have known people during COVID who've worked 12-hour shifts in COVID wards and gone for their run in the evening, and then suddenly they're walking around the supermarket and they're getting a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so you have to be really reasonable with yourself. Exercise is very, very good. I'm not saying anything at all. I'm a great advocate of it. I do
Yes.
walk every day myself. But we have to understand when the body can take the extra pressures of really intense exercise or
Yes.
not.
Yeah. Again, I suppose that goes back to that
That's
mind-body connection.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you work in schools as well, and healthcare. You work in sort of education as well. You teach as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I suppose talking about this idea of self-care, self-compassion, how important are those in sort of in those cultures, in those workplace cultures, in those educational settings?
Mm. Well, compassion, if you look it up, it's compelier, which means I want to suffer with, and nobody wants to suffer with anybody. We have enough suffering of our own. But when you think about it, we want to understand other people's distress and suffering. So when you talk about compassionate practices of any nature, they must hold a number of aspects for me. I often talk about the compassion footprint that I developed to help and support people understand what compassion is. So, if I asked you what compassion is, you'd give me a set of maybe 3 values that you have. But if I asked you what it was like to be treated very discompassionately, you'd really remember that. We always remember the assistant who's kind to us, but we actually remember deeply the person who's unkind to us.
So again, I suppose that again the idea of self-compassion.
Oh yeah, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
I'm on my
Yeah.
soapbox and got lost
No,
on the soapbox.
I'm honestly I'm getting lost in it as well. It's fantastic.
Sorry.
No, no, no.
Yeah, so the compassion footprint is basically a number of qualities that you carry in your footstep every day when you're engaging with somebody. You might not use them all, but you'll use some of them.
Yeah.
And there are things like thoughtfulness, understanding, empathy, kindness, your knowledge and skill of what you can offer to the world, your intuition. Um, Also things like your gentleness, okay, acceptance,
Yeah.
appreciation, gratitude for what we have, hope. And I always feel hope is one of the key ones we carry because hope is the um, actual light at the end of the tunnel. It's the spark that heals the human spirit in some way. It keeps us going. It just connects us to all that is.
Yeah.
And when we don't have hope, we don't have the impetus to live as well as we can.
Yeah. It's a great motivator
Yeah.
to keep you going, give you a sense of purpose.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I suppose on that note, I suppose for young people, and I know you spoke about COVID and the effects that that had on people. I suppose from your perspective, how did you see it affecting sort of younger people whose brains were still in that developing stage? How did it affect them at the time? How is it affecting them now as they've gotten that bit older?
Well, as human beings, we all have a set of emotional needs that, apart from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the basic things that we need, there's emotional needs that are very important in how we live our lives. And I think for younger people, there was a sense of disbelief at what was happening. But if you look at the emotional needs, it kind of explains why they would feel that way. So the emotional needs talk about a meaning and purpose in your life. So their schools were interrupted, their lives were interrupted. The purpose of their life was a question of meaning around that. So purpose and meaning, what we put our 2 feet on the floor for in the morning to get up, to give us impetus to live our life, meaning and purpose. Now, for some, that could be a faith, or could be nature, or could be connection with really practical things in our life. But for most of us, it's our family. It's deep connections with the people we love. It's doing the best for them, our homes and our careers, really. Um, that's one of the things that was very evident. Another thing was security. So they didn't feel at all secure. This was life-threatening, fatal disease. And so when security is challenged, it's like the building without the cornerstone, to keep it
Yes.
up. It becomes very vulnerable to all kinds of alterations, particularly in our mental status. And also their privacies, we talk about privacy, time to reflect, but actually they had more time than most to reflect because of their isolation.
Yeah.
So, those were things. Also, their love and intimacy during that time was interrupted.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I know family and friends, but even your deepest connections, your smallest interval connection with somebody is an intimate engagement, and all the way right up to full intimacy. So that was challenge for them.
Yeah.
And violation to make your own decisions, to make choices about your life, was totally restrained.
Yeah.
So you can see why a lot of younger people went into this low mood syndrome. Um, they were neither happy nor sad, they were just existing. And, as we spoke about all the different things that were happening in the brain, that was happening them as well. So it was an overwhelming time for them. Probably a time that they will look back on and see as traumatic.
Yes.
And so when we think about trauma, trauma is embedded in that little security officer, that amygdala in the brain, and it's stimulated up quicker because anything that challenges you, hurts you, or has damaged you in any way is held in the amygdala. The good memories are held in the hippocampus, in a
Okay.
different part of the brain. So the brain will pattern match very quickly with things like it.
Yes.
For me, I worked during the AIDS crisis, for example, and for me, a lot of COVID had similar connotations to the AIDS crisis about the touching and the way the bodies were prepared for disposal. And because I had worked during that very challenging, very caring and intimate time in my life, I think it prepared me for COVID. So my brain says, okay, you saw something like that before, you got it, you won't be as wired up a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And so you'll do what you're told about COVID and everything will be okay. So I'm sure there were people going through other traumas at that time during COVID.
Yeah.
If you had anything that turned your life upside down, a divorce, a break in relationship, a loss, a grief, or any kind of other traumas that were going on in your life at that time.
They
So,
will have embedded themselves quite deeply.
exactly.
Yeah.
Probably deeper than other times in their lives because of the sense of the environments in which it happened.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I suppose for people, we're on the other side of it now. But I suppose for those people who still have that security officer in their head, who are still holding on to those things, who still find their lives sort of limited or affected still
Mm.
by those memories, by that trauma. What is the approach for freeing yourself
Yeah.
from that?
And I always think that, if we know the natural resources we have in the body to be able to cope, we've all had difficult situations in our lives. And then we look back and say, oh my goodness, how did I get through that time? How did I do that?
Yeah.
And if I was back again, would I be able to do it? Right. So actually, our brain becomes resilient with meeting different challenges and getting through them and or over them. And it is true to say in some light way that what doesn't kill us does make us that little bit stronger and more resilient because we work our way through it.
Yeah.
Now, we don't want anything dramatic to cause us to feel like that, but that is certainly true. So let's look at the natural resources that we have, because this helps people to reframe their life and move forward from critical events. When we talk about Gabor Mate, for example, he has written many books on trauma, and he suggests this, that it might feel like a trauma at the time, and for sure there are people having most difficult abuses in their life and there is trauma. But he says, as you move on from them, you will look back and see them more as a challenge if they haven't impeded you in your life. That's the key. A trauma is only a trauma when it impedes you and stops you moving forward and exploring your life. It makes you sit in the trauma, right? So, of course, that's the work that we do as psychologists to support people. But people think that because you come for work with trauma, that we can relieve you of your trauma. But trauma is never relieved. The experience of it, we can change around it and reframe it. But the experience of that trauma is always in the brain and the amygdala. And when it sees something like it, it will pop up again. So I always say trauma is a bit like a book on a shelf, you know. The experience will come and you'll feel the pattern match to what it's like, and then you'll pick the book up and you'll look at it and you'll see the trauma again and you'll say, put the book back on the shelf. So we deal with traumas in different ways. You know, it's like boxing something, and, you know, it's like Pandora's box. It comes up then with other vulnerabilities. Other things, the pattern match is very important when it comes to the body and being able to respond, because that's what stops us. That's what alerts us.
Yes.
It tells us, well, look, I was in this difficult situation before and this wasn't good for you. You know, so that's the brain trying to tell you that that existence wasn't very good for you.
When we're talking about those resources, what are we looking at? What are we talking about?
Yeah, there's a number of resources that we have, the ones I've mentioned just before, but things like imagination, for example, and long-term memory. These really help us because imagination is our creative brain trying to problem solve, to see things in a different way. And we're the only mammal alive that can do that. In the same way as that our long-term memory, you know, most of what we're doing here today goes into the short-term memory, and then it's translated by a process through fibers into the long-term memory. That's how we remember things.
Yeah.
So it makes us it makes it easier for us to do things better. And we're the only mammal also that has an objective self. And to explain that, that means that psychology speaks. So if I said, I can look back at myself tonight, sitting here doing this podcast with you and thinking about all the things I could have said and done better, that's my brain telling me it's updating my skills and my knowledge. So the next time I do something like that, I will have the premise of that,
Yes.
that objecting self. The other thing that we have is incredible, which I love talking about, is the dreaming brain. And we could spend all night talking about sleep, but sleep is one of the most important aspects to caring for yourself when you're stressed. And, you know, we talk about sleep hygiene and all these routines about trying to go to bed at similar times, but we have to live our life as well, get up at certain times, making our environment, you know, a nice place to sleep with less noise. And, you know, actually, I'm not so sure about the research on this blue light theory on the phone and all the rest of it, but I do feel that the more relaxed you make an environment, the better it is. And, you know, for sleep, there are two parts of sleep that really are essential. And the first one we sort of spoke about already, which was restorative sleep. It's where the brain repairs cells it cannot do while it's awake.
And this is where the serotonin comes in.
And this is where the serotonin comes in,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, I often disrespectfully call it the deceased man's sleep, because we lie so flat, you know, we lie so motionless,
Yes.
because our respiratory rate goes down, our blood pressure goes down. We're just on the verge of being alive at that point in the night. And that's why so many patients can slip over at that time. So during that time, the medulla oblongata, some of the cells in there are repaired by the serotonin, cannot be done, and there's certain aspects of the brain that can't be repaired while you're awake. So it's done at that point of the night. Also, the myelin sheets that go down the spinal cord. And also, there's a huge vagus nerve that comes from what we would say the butt of our pole at home, right down to where you had a tail.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system calms us down. The REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep, as we know, and we all have these watches today that tell us how many steps are moving and what levels of sleep we're in and if it's light and all the rest of it. And, you know, when you're finished your restorative sleep in the nighttime, which is an hour and a half is all, an hour, you slip into this dreaming brain. Whether you remember it or not is irrelevant. So in that REM sleep, you are processing emotion. So if I have the snot with somebody today and I'm worried about it and upset about my feelings about it, and I don't have a way of talking about it or exploring it in a different form, I actually take it into my sleep. So in my sleep, I'm trying through a metaphorical process or cartooning to try and process that emotion so that I can carry it and store it in the long-term memory the next day. So it's actually a neuroscientific thing that we're doing. So it's a bit like dreaming that I'm out in a boat in the middle of the ocean and no one's coming to get me. But if I was to analyze the feeling I had while I was dreaming about being in the boat, it might be similar to the feeling I had when I was having the tiff with whoever I was having it with today.
Yeah.
So that's what I talk about, the metaphorical and cartooning aspect of it.
Yeah. It's the way I was dealing sort of on that subconscious level.
Subconsciously, so I can get up, and it's not that I won't feel that emotion when I get up, or you know, but I will be able to get on a little bit with my day.
Yeah.
In some aspect. So time and space is another thing that we need to have when we're stressed. You know, I remember an older ward sister used to say to us when we were young students out half the night and all the rest of it and heading into work, she would say, pause, take a breath and come back to me. Pause, take a breath. So sometimes we need to be still. And breathing, of course, we haven't discussed this, but breathing is an essential component to how we deal with our stress. But the jury is out on what type of breathing. There's so many different elements of breath work.
Yes.
The extent of it, and it's all good. But there's certain types of it that only is available to you in a busy environment, for example. If I am rushing down the corridor to an emergency, or I have a sales pitch and I have only an hour to get it ready, you know, that intensity. How do I take a long, deep, slow breath and just sit in the moment and return to my normal breathing? If the breathing is going to agitate the brain, it's not going to relax the body. That's what I always say. Yeah. So just calming the body down. There's such a thing as 7-11 breathing, box breathing, all of these things. And they're all perfect instruments. But there's sometimes we have to be able to use them in the practical environment rather than sitting down.
Yeah, I suppose that's the difficulty, is we live in such a busy world, such a busy time. I suppose trying to carve out that mental space for yourself to be able to manage those emotions, manage that stress, can be quite difficult. Yeah.
We have the ability as human beings to create environments of nurture. You know, when we're born and we come into this world, we have a certain set of templates. It's in all animal kingdoms. You know, if you look at the cow in the field who has the calf, right? So when she's having her calf, she will try and isolate herself from the others. In nature, I'm talking about, and she will prepare a safe place for that calf delivery. The calf is born, she will lick the calf to get the calf warm. She'll get the calf up to drink the bee stings, otherwise the calf won't be a strong calf. And if she has a difficult birth, she will go back and eat her own afterbirth for the iron. So when we are born, and we come in and hopefully with everything as it should be without impediment. Of course, if there are other issues there, this isn't what happens. But we come in with these templates in place, whereas, a baby knows how to cry to get attention. It knows how to cry to be fed or to be changed. And the other things we learn instinctively are things that we adapt to in our environment. So our socialization, who we're living with, um, their style of living, our environment, and what's around us.
Yeah. Is this where we get into that kind of topic of nature versus nurture?
Yes,
Yeah.
a little. And, it's not to say that I'm born into maybe an environment that might not be that compassionate or caring, but it doesn't, it does influence me. Whether it can drive me in the direction that I will never have this happen to my own children, I will never have that environment available to me again, or it may well be that we can turn this into a negative,
Yeah.
and that we start to be that environment and be the person that we were seen to be with during that time.
So, Mary, we talked a little bit about the responses in the brain when it comes to stress. Can we talk a little bit maybe about the physical responses that we might
Yeah,
experience?
thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, it's very important because the brain just generates its effects a little bit before the body. But, we talked about the HPA axis, stimulation of the hippocampus, peritoneal glands, and the adrenals, and later the thyroid glands. So, what happens here is that, if you look at the adrenals, I always think of the adrenal glands are a bit like the old farming caps that sit over the kidneys. If you look at them on a map of the anatomy, they're like covers over the kidneys. And they're on the same blood supply, lymphatic supply, nervous supply as the kidneys. So when they excrete the neuropeptides and the cortisol and the adrenaline, the nearest organ to them essentially is the kidney. And it seems that the glomerular rate sometimes can change a little bit in the kidney, particularly with women when they're stressed. So they often feel a little cystitis or burning sensation or whatever. And you might look around and look at people who've maybe gone through grief or loss or trauma or breakups or financial situations, and suddenly they have this other pathology that they didn't have, maybe a burning sensation. So that's often happens for women. The cortisol is the second one to be released. The adrenaline is the first. So the adrenaline, of course, it's like I want to flood my body with major organs with blood supply to keep them going and fire me up. So my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up. Um, it compounds the system, so you'll get this flush type headache. It's like a halo type headache, I call it. If you put up your hand, brought down a halo and put it right across this middle focus of the neocortex that we were talking about here, right around, it impedes you, it stops you. You have to go get your breath of fresh air, take a cup of tea, take a break of some kind, take your whatever you're having, paracetamol or whatever, to get rid of it. And that's impeding. And also, when you work in healthcare, you see a lot of the evidence of this. So, you might see somebody coming in from a chronic traffic accident who you don't know how they're still alive, bless them. But the fight and flight responses, which is key as a resource in our body, has flushed the blood to the major organs to keep them alive. So when you think about this, when you're stressed in everyday life, um, the blood supply isn't going to organs that can, it's limited supply to organs that can do without this flushing. For example, the gut is one of them. So now we're starting to have problems with our digestion, maybe getting a heartburn, as we call it, or gastritis. Or in men, particularly, it can go on to develop ulcers very quickly. So yeah, it's because the blood supply isn't flushing the gut. The same with the bowel. Both men and women suffer from this equally, in the sense that you can get this irritable bowel symptoms of tightening and loosening, and that's very distressing. So they're the things that come up quite a bit for the adrenaline. The other aspect is cortisol, and cortisol wants me to fight you, drug, right? So it's preparing me in all aspects to go in there and fight that line we were talking about earlier, right? But here's the thing. In life, we can't say, I'm off now, I'm not going into that emergency, or I'm not dealing with that, I'm running away.
Yeah.
So the fight and flight response we can either run away from it, stand and fight it. So we're fighting the line a lot of the time. So we need the cortisol. And the cortisol does a couple of things. It does, one, it desensitizes the skin. So you've heard on the news, maybe during COVID, where staff were very deformed, even their noses from the masks, those duck masks during the time of COVID. Well, their skin was desensitized by the cortisol. So they didn't actually feel themselves being cut. So, if, for example, you're very stressed about something, you might find these little bruises that you have from hitting off of things that you didn't notice. You say, where'd I get that? Because your skin is desensitized. So it's like as if the lion is going to fight me in there and he's going to scrape my skin, I'm not going to feel it as much. It won't stop me fighting him.
Can't be distracted.
Yeah. So cortisol also, it makes the distance between the stimulus and the response tighter. So in other words, I have an issue with you, and normally you would allow that to go way over your head because Mary's always like this. And but today you've had different shifts and time is tight and you're just ready to fire.
Yeah.
So, if you read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about this resilience, man's resilience, and one of them is the fight response.
Yes.
That gives us the trigger we feel alive when we're fighting somebody. It's a heightened sensation. So, we're very good to manage that trigger at work because we know if we say something, we can't take it back.
We won't be in work for very long.
I won't be in work for very long. But then we go home into our environments that are secure and somebody has done is wrong, or you trip in over the school bags, or the dinner is the wrong thing, or whatever. And we release it in the environments that are secure to us. And if we don't do that, and we're very calm and considerate people, we will take it into the dreaming brain, which we just explained, where we try and desensitize that. Yeah. So cortisol, it also creates this headache, but it's a bit like I was out late headache. That foggy headache that I can't connect the dots the next day as quick, and I'm not as efficient with doing things, and I should do things with one hand behind my back, and today I need three hands. Those kind of things. So cortisol does that as well. So that's the main aspect of cortisol. Of course, cortisol will always want to build fat to store sugar. Oh. So the next thing that happens in your body, because of the thyroxine that's going in the fight and flight response, is the sugars are disordered. So I have to eat more to keep my energy up. A lot of my stores of sugar are being released from my muscles into my bloodstream to keep my system fired up. If that makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
If you're driving fast in your car, it'll use more fuel.
Yeah. So you're just burning through it, so it needs to. So that mechanism kicks in.
Yeah, and of course, that's the one thing. We're great in the immediate time. If this is a stressful situation, we're dealing with it. But afterwards, we can be quite flat and low. And the reason for that is it's like a deflated balloon. The energy in the muscles and in our bodies is getting lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, and then we start to get
until
fatigued.
We're at a kind of a driving pace.
Yeah, and I suppose that's when stress can almost become like white noise a little bit. It's there, but you're just not paying attention to it. It's so pervasive in your daily life.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I really I'm sort of intrigued again by all those sort of responses and how, again, if we don't manage it, how it can sort of come to us in the subconscious brain within sleep and all that. I suppose what would be your main tactic for sort of trying to deal with it before it gets to that point? Before, because as you say, when it's the brain, it presents itself beyond the point of it's been going on a lot longer than before you recognize it. When it's going on in the body, again, you're having all these sort of physical responses. I've definitely been that person through stressful periods, having sort of wild, crazy, intense nightmares. I suppose once we're at that point, or maybe even before it, how do we what's the best way to kind of manage it?
Mm.
What's the best way to kind of give ourselves that mental space, give ourselves that self-compassion um, to not let to run away with us.
Yeah. And I've one very, very simplistic way of talking about this.
Mm.
And it's to take out anything that's not necessary in your life and go really back to the core basics. So I call it simplify rule, right? When we're in crisis, we need to stay going and we don't need additional stuff crowding the space we have in our head, because that tension is quite there and it often feels like you can't put another thought into your head today. So I always talk about, there was a program, I think it was on ITV some years ago, and it was called The Cube.
Oh yeah.
And people went into the cube and they had an activity to do in the cube. And if they were losing a lot, they had so many lives to use in the cube to earn so much money. And when it got to the point when the lives were nearly expired, they could at any point use this one advantage, which was to simplify.
Right.
And to simplify meant I made what I was doing that little bit easier to achieve, or I had more space and time to do it. So I think it's a good principle to take into your life. It's like the other night I was going out and I was rushing because I didn't get there in time. I was preparing to go out. I had this chain that I wanted to wear and I couldn't get it to fix on my neck. Right? And everybody was shouting at me, am I ready? Am I ready? And I'm saying, I can't get this thing on. Okay, so I just put the chain in my pocket. And in the car, when I was going there, I took a couple of deep breaths and I took out the chain. And because the environment wasn't intense or controlling of me, I had time to manipulate the necklace and put it on. So sometimes it's the speed of things that come at you and the intensive things that come at you that slows you down. So, this little part of your brain is getting tight. So, if you take a breath and you pause, I often say to kids that are going into children, adults now, they're going in to do exams, don't be the student in the corridor giggling with the rest of them, telling everybody you didn't do your work. Even if you didn't do your work, you know something and you've retained something from that time. Take a couple of deep breaths and go into that exam calm. Calm, why? Because you can read the paper and you won't misread a question. You won't forget to turn the page around and see the question at the back. And you won't interpret whether I have to do two parts of it or not.
Yeah.
So being calm, centered, always allows things to don't look as complex.
Yeah.
And if they are, step back. You can step forward when you want to speed something up. Step back, pause, take a breath. Be present to what's going on. We see such beauty around us every day in the people we meet. And I hope they recognize the beauty in us too. And, we need love in our hearts, peace in our souls, and time to enjoy it all.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. That was I think we'll have to end it there. That was fantastic. Mary, thank you so much for your time.
Okay. I hope you get something out of it.
That's it for today's episode of One Step Better. I'd like to thank Mary Prendergast for joining us today and sharing her expertise with us on the science of stress. If you want to see more, please check out our socials at Hope Media Ireland and our website, hopemedia.ie.